Hi everyone, welcome to the SAP session, the last session of the day. So hopefully we can keep you awake before the concert. So this is the real world success stories of SAP and AI on Google Cloud. So what we've done here is we basically going to have a very quick session of me providing an update on the announcements that we have at the event and some recent launches that we have that we want to cover. And then I'll invite three esteemed customers to join me on stage, and then we will be the support band for Weezer. It's a bucket list item that we're actually the support band, so I'll invite Jay, Lars, and Phil on stage, and then we'll do a round discussion on this. So without further ado, we will go through the news and the announcements, and then we'll talk, as I said, migration and innovation. So product updates, and I'll go quickly because we have a lot of content here to cover, and I want to save time for the panel. At Google, we've kind of got 5 pillars that we're focused at for SAP. First is we have the most reliable infrastructure in the industry. And that big focus for us was delivering, which we did 2 next ago, 99.95 availability, single instance availability for our large memory optimized machines. And these machines are purpose built for SAP HANA. And this also is the machines that are also run under RISE and also run under SAP's line of business applications. And really the focus on us was there to make sure it's not just about HA, it's not just about pairs of systems, but making sure that we have the minimal downtime. So that you don't have to be without a HA pair in production, but also that you have the most reliable SAP deployments when you run on Google Cloud. Second one is performance. And a couple of things that we did was that we delivered X4 systems last year. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the panel. And this was, we're the first to certify 32 terabyte servers. With X4, we have the highest SAPs. We'll talk a little bit about that, about the SAPs. So this is achieved by any cloud or on-premise for the X4 servers. We were the first to certify M4, Intel's 5th generation CPU. And then we're also the first to certify with C4 for very, if you want to say CPU intensive workloads, the 6th generation Intel CPU. Beyond that, scalability. So we can scale up to 32 terabytes, but scaling out, we certified to scale out on X4 for 4 nodes up to 256 terabytes. Additionally, with RISE, we were the first cloud under RISE to have the first and the second customer on 32 terabyte servers. So these are large scale up available. And then also we're the first cloud to actually have scale out on RISE as well. So we are really working with SAP, co-innovating with SAP to innovate around technology and ensure that we have the right technology for customers to start from even the smallest SAP deployment to the largest. Additionally, it's not just about infrastructure, it's about also operating it and being secure when you operate it. So what we have is a workload management tool, which basically has 3 components. One is deploying with our best practices. So the best layout for how you build and deploy your SAP systems. And that's deploying the initial system, the storage, and then deploying HA, or deploying, actually we'll install the OS, so we'll install the HANA system and also the SAP software for you based on Google's best practices that we spent years building with SAP. Then the second phase is that we have validation to validate how you are versus best practices. What we see over time is you build, your system is pristine at the start, but over time you have, if you want to say, deviations. So it might be one application server, it might be one of your databases in your environment. When this really constantly checks, are you actually deviating from best practices? You can also create your own rules. And then finally, we have observability, which we're going to talk about in little slides, which is basically how do we observe and understand your infrastructure usage, the logs, things that are happening behind the scenes from an SAP lens. And that's really a big focus that we did there. And then finally, business transformation. Our A2A protocol, this is something we launched last year and last Sapphire. SAP was one of the joining, if you want to say, to the founding of this to be able to communicate between agents. So it's not just about agents, one agent, and only running on Google technology, only running on Microsoft, Amazon, all joined this consortium on this protocol to ensure that we have interoperability when you build agents. And we know the world is going to be very agentic. If you see what this event's like, you'll see what Sapphire is in a couple of weeks. So that's something that we're working heavily with SAP to ensure we have. And then we have the ABAP SDK, which is if you think what this is basically we deliver an SDK for you to install inside your ABAP system, whether that's inside your own or inside a BTP, ABAP Cloud, steampunk system, that has stubs connecting to all 294 Google services. So whether that's PubSub, whether that's Maps, Document AI, Translate AI, and you'll see other ones like Vertex AI and also replication to BigQuery. These are all solutions that we deliver in an ABAP SDK. The SDK itself is free of charge. You deploy it, and then whatever service you consume and you connect to. And the idea there is that your ABAPers can consume these services, whether they're like publishing to PubSub or using our maps for address validation, without needing to understand Google Cloud. They just see it as an ABAP class. And then Cortex is our accelerator for how to build and rapidly onboard SAP and other enterprise applications into BigQuery. So this delivers the data models, the semantic layer, the pre-built AI, pre-built Looker dashboards and visualizations that you can take and use as a rapid acceleration. Okay, talking about some announcements, we're going to go through this very quickly. So single instance SLA I mentioned. This is something that we made available. It used to be available for 1 terabyte and above systems. What we did with the introduction of the latest version of M4, it's now available for 250 gigabytes all the way to 32 terabytes, which means every size of HANA now can take advantage of our 99.95 leading SLA. So that means that you get the benefit. It's not just if you have a large system, it's basically every certified large system from, as I said, you can go from 250, 380, 512, 1 terabyte, 1.5 terabytes, 2 terabytes, all of them get the SLA. And then from RISE, we've been working with RISE and it was previewed at our last next session with Lalit, and this was just the, if you're going to say, Lalit's comment about when he released it for RISE, to have an application level 99.95 based on Google's infrastructure. So this is all of our infrastructure, all our infrastructure lays, and then RISE being able to offer that level of availability for the application itself. So that's a HANA database, and that's the application layers. Okay, next one is benchmarks, which is really important to know what sort of performance you're going to get. There is a new benchmark from SAP called ASAPs. It's actually a SAP HANA-based benchmark. The prior one that's SAPs is not based on HANA. It's optional in HANA. And this new one is an order-to-cash benchmark. And we were the first ones to publish the SAPs numbers for greater than 8 socket servers. And we actually published it for 32 terabytes. And it gets 494K ASAPs. And also, we published the SAPs for all of our X4. So that means it's not just 32 terabyte, 24 terabyte, 16, and additionally all the way to 6 terabytes. And those SAPs numbers that we're able to achieve with the X4 platform are greater than any other cloud and any other on-premise system is achieved with SAPs. And if you think that that's our servers, that's based on Titanium infrastructure, our hyperdisk infrastructure, it's that whole stack we certify and get the SAPs for. And you might say, what is this X4 6 terabyte? You didn't talk about this before. Well, actually, we have new versions of X4 that came, which was 6 terabyte, an 8 terabyte, and a 12 terabyte that joined the 16, 24, and 32. And that was launched in Q4. And these are all certified for SAP with standard sizing. So as you scale, you still are certified for standard sizing for both. So why we did both on these was really to ensure that with the new analytics capabilities that you're getting with S/4HANA, and then also if you think about agentic, the type of additional workload you're going to get on your application is going to consume a lot more CPU, and that's really for us was about standard that you're actually able to scale both those. And OLAP typically has twice the amount of CPU as an OLTP system, so that's just behind the scenes. Next one is scale out. SAP changed its scale out certifications, so now they certify under 8 socket servers. And this is to do with the new generations having so much CPU, so much memory in less amount of CPU cores. And we were the first ones to certify actually a 4-socket server. And that basically was the 8 terabyte and 12 terabyte we certified in March 26. So we were the first. And the idea for this is that you shouldn't have to go all the way up to 32 terabytes and then have another 32 terabytes. That's a very big step for the 33rd terabyte that you need. So you can actually now do smaller chunks. So that means you can do much more right sizing and cost optimizing. Another announcement here at Next is the M4 high throughput, sometimes called M4N, and that will give us up to 20 gigabytes per second throughput on a virtual machine. And that's really a huge step up on the performance. Now you might say, do I need this for HANA? HANA is an in-memory database. And the answer is still have a lot of customers that have very high throughputs needed for HANA. And that'd be things like rehydration, backup recovery, but also log throughput. But additionally, we see this for a lot of the ECC systems that are still running Oracle, DB2, SQL Server as well. And you can choose how much storage throughput that you want on these servers. And you can, of course, tune hyperdisk with the IOPS or hyperdisk extreme, and hyperdisk balanced you can tune based on throughput and IOPS. Okay, next one, as I mentioned, with Workload Manager, we have something called SAP Observability, and this is AI-driven analysis of what is happening from your infrastructure and your SAP logs. And this is really taking your infrastructure and not just saying this is a bunch of infrastructure, it's really saying this is my production ERP system, show me what is happening. These are my application servers, my database servers. And then with AI, you can actually inquisite what's happening in the system, what other systems have this problem. If I have an issue on an OS, what other versions are on this OS? If I'm running out of CPU, well, what are my other application servers? And you can have a dialogue with your SAP system and actually say, how would I correct this? And it will actually make recommendations on how to actually fix it. And that root cause analysis, AI detection, and then you're going to go into more, you can use this AI also to do more automated testing and actually prediction of what's going to happen in the future, like when will I run out of space on this at the current schedule. And then security, switching from observability to security, Assured Workloads was renamed Data Boundaries, and we have a new offering, which you might see for our French customers. It's something we offer with a partner, Sens. And this is really where we have meeting all of the French, and it's the SecNum cloud requirements, which is basically in France, run by French citizens, but it's Google Cloud infrastructure. So all those infrastructure enhancements you saw previously are all available, but they're available through our partner Sens. And this basically means all our certifications, you can leverage them for deploying there. And this is something you're going to see more of us doing, is how do we offer data boundaries with partners, but then also data boundaries there'll be, for example, with SAP and other solutions as well. And this really is to meet all of the local compliance and regulatory requirements, which actually we'll talk a little bit about that in the panel. And then security, we want to also launch into preview here, is SecOps for SAP. So this is basically SAP-aware content that we're deploying for Chronicle. So this is basically via Chronicle. We actually have the process that you will get these rules delivered by Google. You can also build your own. And actually, we're delivering in a community model that we can have partners. So other companies that are actually doing threat detection can actually add their own rules, and then you can check for those in the Chronicle, just like you would for the rest of your workloads. But these are not just looking at infrastructure. These are looking at the SAP logs. So whether you're a RISE customer or a direct customer, you can ingest the logs, your application logs, not just infrastructure logs, and combine them with the infrastructure logs to actually look at your threat detections. And you might have realized last year, one of the biggest threats that Mandiant found was actually an exploit through NetWeaver Web Application Server for actually injecting code, which actually was a very big hole for ransomware. And that was one of the biggest ones. And that's actually now we're starting to see enterprise workloads becoming the target, not just going to the OS, but you're actually coming through the application layers. So this will help avoid that and also get you the latest content that you get from our constant updated Chronicle. And then the last one is business transformation. ABAP SDK, as I mentioned, this is where we deliver the pre-built. What we've delivered in the latest version is in support for Gemini 3.1 Pro. There's some enhancements here on how you can actually call from ABAP Gemini, because you may have an ABAP application that you actually want to call an agent and to do something for you. And that agent could be doing something in SAP, but it could be doing something on another enterprise, like it could be doing something on BigQuery, it could be doing something on Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, wherever you want to connect to. What we're doing is the enhanced function call is how you can actually configure the reasoning model. And the part of that is to look at how much workload you're actually generating. Because the big problem with agents is you can actually consume very quickly a lot of CPU, which is great. The processing power is great for Google, but it's not necessarily great for your wallets. So this is something where you actually have very tight and very fine-grained being able to look at how much resources, how much you want to be able to do that. Because as we know, agentic is very, very powerful, but there's also the enterprise, if you want to say, controls that you need to put in place. Then we have a SDK for Vertex AI. We also have a BigQuery AI and ML toolkit that allows you to do AI calls directly from ABAP into BigQuery. We also have a BigQuery toolkit that enables you to replicate data directly from SAP, whether that SAP is running on-prem or on Rise or on Google Cloud, directly into BigQuery, and you can use CDS views or you can use ODP. And then, as I mentioned, 294 cloud APIs all delivered out of the box. Okay, final announcement is we're launching next the connector for BigQuery, which is called a zero data copy connector for BDC. So this allows you to have BDC connect bidirectionally to BigQuery to call BDC without having to move data between them. So if you have your data in a BDC, you can actually call it, if you want to say federated queries calls into BDC, and BDC can call into BigQuery without having to actually move data. We also include, as part of this, the connection that egress cost is actually included in the solution as well. So this is really about how do you actually have the SAP world, and if you want to say the greater SAP and non-SAP world in BigQuery connected to each other with SAP standard functionality. And then finally, the bottom right, we have BDC available in 4 regions, and in Q2, we'll be adding Japan, Israel, Brazil, Australia as well to that. So that's be all Google Cloud-based BTP, BDP, BDC regions will be available. Okay, I would now like to invite our guests. So Phil, Lars, and Jay on stage, and we'll have a brief Q&A. Okay, so you're the stars of this. So I'll start with Phil. So Phil, from Deloitte, you're a very large multinational company with a very, very large SAP deployment that you just, if you say, recently moved to Google Cloud. Right. Would you like to share some of your learnings on the migration and some of what you've observed?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. We currently are operating, just kind of setting stage and dynamics related to that. We're currently running on S4 version 2023. We're running that in GCP, as Mike mentioned, and we made that transition back in 2024. Our overall landscape and overall dynamics is we run a single instance supporting 36 geographies around the globe with another 20 in the pipeline, and we're supporting about 400,000 end users. So pretty dynamic, large volume, heavy traffic, heavy activity. The part that was impressive to us back when we started our journey to move to GCP in 2023 and finalizing that in 24 was the fact that we were able to not only make that transition fairly seamlessly, but we were able to also expand our scalability, expand our performance, and really drive from a overall kind of operational perspective more scalable, more sustainable, and future-proof our environment as we're going forward. We are currently in a process of transitioning once again to Rise Private Cloud, and we've started that journey for our global ERP system, and we actually are, in addition, as we're making that move to Rise, we're also looking at how do we transition to BDC as well, unlocking Joule, BDP, and other product innovations along the way.
Yeah, and Phil, you're one of our first customers to go live on X4 when we launched. You want to talk a little bit about what X4 has meant and how you've taken advantage of those for your business?
Yeah, I will say that obviously as we do operate, and I mentioned our kind of global nature and scale that we're operating at, we are truly a 24/7, 365 shop. We have high activity, high traffic. We are working in a landscape that we are constantly expanding, both from a footprint perspective as well as from a functional perspective as well. Those activities have caused us to continue to grow in size and complexity. And as we made that change to X4, what that did was it gave us an additional headroom, an additional space to allow us to be able to see performance improvements, as well as to allow us to be able to increase or see enhanced run times, enhanced job processing, while also supporting our month-end and year-end closing activities that are extremely high, high volume, high intensity for short periods of time. So X4 has given us a lot of comfort there. And again, not to jinx ourselves, but we have seen high levels of availability, high levels of scalability, and it's been a very positive experience for us.
Thanks, Phil. Now, switching to another global business, Lars at Deutsche Börse runs the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, the DAX. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how Google Cloud meets your highly regulated environment requirements. I would say that you can talk a little bit about how you were able to make that jump to the cloud.
No, thank you, Mike, and happy to do so. First of all, I would say a similar journey than Phil described, with the only difference we started a bit earlier, so most probably around 2019, 2020. And have been at a point where, at least from a finance industry point of view and being heavily regulated, so this is part of our business, we have been in a situation that on the one side, regulators were kind of not knowing cloud at this point in time. So for them, cloud was a bit like something that I would not say is dangerous, but something that is unknown. And very often also their checklist they had would not be fitting, right? Because they had checklists against data centers, right? You need to have physical access, you need to have access cards, you need to show me the server the machine is running on. So all these type of things, which in the cloud, of course, was not easy to do. On the other side, we had internal people who have been operating infrastructure and applications like they have always been doing. So you also had to convince those that give it out of hand, it will become better, because they were at the mindset that if you give it out of hand, it can only get worse. So this was a bit on the people side, so it was one of the challenges. The second one was that also running SAP workloads at this time in the cloud was still pretty new. So when we started, it was around 5% of SAP customers running in general in the cloud. A lot had it on the pipeline, but have not started. I remember the day when I basically spoke to our team, and then also we spoke to Google in the sense of, we asked first Google, can we do SAP in Google? They said, of course. Then we asked the internal team, they said, no way. So we had to bring people together and give them a few nights to sleep about. But we also said we technology-wise, we had a lot of things to renovate. So infrastructure had to be renovated. Processes had to be renovated, so infrastructure processes and operations processes. We didn't have proper monitoring. High availability was not in place, so we had manual failovers, and we had also incidents where failovers took sometimes 3 to 4 hours. While from a business point of view, we need an RPO 0 to 2 hours. We need an RTO 0 to 2 hours. So this was a bit of the moment where either do it right and do a mega kind of a big leap, or do a small increment and repeat 3 years later. And we said, like, let's give it a try. There's nothing to lose. And we had a lot of work to do, both regulators, people, also technology-wise. But we have been moving into Google Cloud and started 2020, production go live 2023, with S4HANA completely running in the cloud. We have also migrated periphery systems directly into Google Cloud, because they also had to be set up in the same way. And this was kind of the move. And today also operating on a 2023 version, right now going for the upgrade 2025, and also preparing for RISE. And I think between 2023 and 2024, I got very often asked, like, why are you not a RISE customer? And this was the point in time where SAP was not as far as we have been, and saying this really also with some pride. And when I spoke to Thomas Saueressig, in charge also in 2025, he said he knows why we decided at this point in time not to do this with SAP. In the meantime, things have changed, and we are now also moving towards RISE.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a long experience of moving to the cloud, and particularly with your regulation. Do you want to share any learnings that you have that you maybe to people who are listening about your journey and what you've seen, what works, what advice you would give them on this? Because meeting your requirements were very rigid. I think it would be good to see what you can share.
I think, implicitly I already said a bit, but can kind of extend it a bit. From a security point of view, I think we had to convince people that cloud is more secure. right? Simply also, and I think can only say thank you as a support to Google. We had to convince people that Google's business model depends on security. And if Google cannot do it right, why should we do it right with not even having the same capabilities? Same is on the infrastructure side. As said, we have very high resilience. We need high availability, running in 2 regions and 3 zones in the meantime. Partially, we were even thinking about going to 3 regions. So kind of having a backup. We skipped it for cost reasons. And we said even with 2 regions, we are good enough. And this was also one of the parameters on premise. You cannot do this, right? Because we had 2 data centers at this point in time, and would not have been possible. Third one was, and this was a lot of work with the regulators also, that a lot of their requirements they had to us in terms of resilience, recovery times, audit trails, monitoring of infrastructure databases, application level, access, geofencing, all these things we didn't have before. And when we said these are things we can introduce in addition was kind of the story that we could drive.
Yeah, thank you, Lars. So moving on to Jay. So you're also in a very highly regulated business. So Teramu is a healthcare provider, life sciences, I should say, healthcare manufacturer, distribution. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your migration as you moved from HEC recently to Google Cloud. So you can talk.
Yeah, for us, is basically, it was not just about an infrastructure refresh. Teramu as a company, we have our business operations across continents. As you said, manufacturing, distribution, commercials. It's pretty much 24/7. We were looking out for a platform that provided us with a high availability, disaster recovery. We had to revamp most of our strategies. And with Google Cloud, what we basically did find was, we did find the SAP reference architectures, what Google provided us with the certified machine types, the compliance piece of it. There was a lot of value add that Google actually brought in for us during our transformation. And we were actually even doing parallelly a 2023 upgrade along with the migration. So it was a dual-edged sword at that point of time for us. But what we found out was with Google Cloud, it was a cleaner path for us. Because for us, high availability just not was on the application layer. We had to hit the database layer, the virtualization layer, and the networking layer below it. Because a failure on any one of these ones would basically means our business operations are impacted. So we had to make sure that every part of this was being factored in. And we were able to define an architecture that we're able to meet at least 99.99 across everything, every tier that we basically mentioned. And yes, as you said, med devices, heavily regulated. GxP compliance is something that FDA, we are extremely have to comply with. And that is just in the US, GDPR in the Europe, GSP in the China. So we did try following the single instance strategy, I would say, but with China, we had a little bit of a challenge. But mostly we were able to move all of our SAP workloads into Google. And what Google Cloud did provide us with was from a GxP compliance perspective, is GxP white papers and compliance mappings, audit reports, SOC reports. So this kind of like helped build that validation package for us. It was not like we're starting everything from scratch, you know. So if it's like we move into a new demographic or we try to decide to start a new company, a new manufacturing, go into a new country, it's not like we start validation from scratch. We had something to build upon. So that basically facilitated and accelerated our approach into rolling out our SAP solutions to all those countries and all those businesses as well. So with Google Cloud, I can say that we were able to build a more resilient platform that was more scalable with our businesses. And it made sure that the emphasis was on the business. And it was also at the same time compliant to our GxP and regulatory requirements.
Yeah. Maybe as a follow-up, any things you can share with people about learnings, what benefits you saw or decision points you had to make that you can elaborate on?
Absolutely, yeah. So we were moving away from a little bit of a constrained hosting model, as I'm going to say. Reliability, that is definitely the biggest benefit that actually helped us. When we hit that 99.99% SLA, our outages went down. The company and the organization was less reacting on platform noise. we were more concentrated on our business processes. We were trying to make sure that our business processes are getting optimized and scaled, and they are given a platform they can basically trust, and it is more stable in nature. And they're not like thinking, oh, maybe we turn on this feature. Oh, do we need to check with infrastructure whether that feature is supported or is it capable to be turned on? So that is what we were able to provide as the biggest benefit. The second, I would say, is definitely the cost factor, the OpEx cost. It's a huge thing for us. The cost of infrastructure is basically, with the move into Google Cloud, definitely went down. So, and how we did it was we got more control over these building blocks, whether it is compute, storage, memory. We were able to make more applied and logical decisions on where we need to apply them. Like, for instance, a planning exercise requires more compute power. Well, we are ready to apply it over there. And if, as you said, a month-end closing or a year-end closing or a reporting requirement that requires more memory utilization, we would provide that. Shop floor requirements, manufacturing. If you need anything more resilient in nature, we were able to provide that. So it was more granular control in nature from what we were used to. And we were able to keep that cost, even though our business was growing, our companies were scaling, our organization was scaling organically. We were able to provide an infrastructure that was basically able to scale along with our businesses as well. Now, the third benefit I would probably say is definitely automation. A platform or a foundational, it requires a lot of, it goes through a life cycle of its own. There is platform lifecycle maintenance, as you mentioned about the workload manager, configuration that needs to be kept intact, in sync, and make sure there are no deviations. There are environmental bills that we need to take care of because we are constantly in a state of constant expansion, exponential growth. So we have these concepts of N+1, N+2, and we had to keep on delivering these environments on a regular basis. So the turnaround time for those drastically reduced. We put in automations from Terraforms and the Gemini on CLI was a boon for us, to be very honest. And VM Manager, we utilize a lot of these Google native tooling to basically facilitate all of those automations. And it did help us provide with a more efficient, stable platform where the human capital requirements did go down. And that also did contribute to the cost in a way. And so that was the third biggest advantage, I would say. Now, the fourth one, I would say, is that was like an unseen advantage. It was more strategic in nature, I would say. When we go away from this mindset of, where do we host SAP or how do we host SAP, we start thinking of SAP, the platform as a stable component, and then we can start thinking about modernizing that platform. How do we make it ready for data, for the connectors, for AI? So we start thinking from that perspective. So what I would say as a lessons learned is, when you think about any transition onto Google Cloud, don't just look at it as a lift and shift. Think of it as an opportunity to optimize your estate, upskill your team as well, modernize your infrastructure, and then automate aggressively. And that is definitely a way to basically get a platform that is, I would say, efficient, easier to maintain, and much more easier to innovate on. Yep. So that is definitely a biggest advantage that we have.
And I think all three of you are in very highly regulated businesses. So I think that's the nature of SAP workloads. So I want to flip it because I have a KPI that I have to talk about AI. I talk about API. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, I'll start with Lars, maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing with AI, how you're using it with enterprise level systems as opposed to, it's of course very different when you think about business processes and durability, reliability, security, things like that. If you can talk a little bit about your AI journey.
No, happy to do so. And most probably a bit, need to be honest, but looking a bit behind the curtains, I think we have in general 3 AI streams in the group. The first one is standard Copilot, right? So speaking Copilots of software as a service products that we are using. They come with the product, you use them within the scale or within the service that people are also using, but in most cases they are isolated. So this is kind of the easiest one. You only have to decide, do you use it or not? Do you train people or do you not train people? And to which extent you also set certain limits, because if you run 100 plus SaaS applications and everyone promises you with my application you can do everything, then of course you have to set some guardrails. The second stream is we are running our own Gen AI platform, also running on Gemini Enterprise. This is what we call the AI for everyone. So people can build agents, we are building agents. It integrates into our data mesh, integrates also in the one or other, let's say, application, be it on the knowledge management side, be it on the IT side. But this is more like how do we bring AI to people. The third one is, and this would be the logic in the SAP context, would be SAP Joule. With SAP Joule we have been, if we are honest, have been struggling a bit in the last years or last 2 years. We started very early, also more driven to a very good relationship with SAP. But marketing was better than product reality. And it took us quite a while, so quite a while means more like than 12 months, to even implement simple AI use cases. I think only in the last 3 to 6 months, Joule has been improving. And this is where we basically have split a bit the journey. On the one side, we said Joule we want to use because, especially in the finance world, for example, it really sits embedded in the core S/4HANA. And this is something you can, let's say, not easily take out. On the other side, we have been starting to extract data from SAP and using them also on our Gen AI platform in the group. And this has been more promising because we had last year 2 or 3 very, very interesting cases where we have been using either standard Gemini or Vertex models in the space of billing, in the space of treasury, just to at least corner them where they are coming from. And in these cases, we have been able, thanks to the cloud setup that we have been establishing before, to extract data very quickly. So we had to load 12 months of a slice, for example, of data, speaking multiple terabytes, was done in a few days. It allowed us also to create multiple copies for trying different models out. And playing around, and this is something that we did in a separate stream, and this was really the more promising one. So this is a bit the mix of experience that we are using on the AI journey.
Yeah, I think everybody's journey is multipath when it comes to AI. Maybe Jay, you can add a little bit about what you're doing in transforming your business as well. You kind of alluded to it.
We are in a very early adoption stage of AI, and it is a deliberate decision. We do not want to be like AI everywhere kind of company. And it more is determined because of the kind of industry where we are in. Heavily regulated, manufacturing, distribution becoming our core. We have tried to look into AI solutions that basically are more risk manageable at that point of time. And we've been successful in many of the implementations. So some of the areas right now that we are currently working upon is on a legal compliance side of it, for expense validation from SAP Concur. We've been using AI to basically make sure, and the effort for that has basically gone down. What usually takes months has gone down to weeks. At the same time, we've been using AI to basically to update our training content. So that is more agentic in nature. Both of these use cases we built on Gemini Enterprise. But the training content, yes, we have agents that basically log into SAP, perform actions, take screenshots, come and update our documentation. And these documentations are very GxP regulated ones. So these are the ones that basically needs to be done, trained upon before we go into the SAP system, before we even get access into the SAP system. So there was a huge backlog of those, and there's a huge human effort to basically update those. But we were able to accomplish that using AI, and that was some of our low-hanging fruits. And we were able to even leverage some of the ABAP SDK on the order-to-cash sales side of it, ARAP, where we had this feasibility to basically query onto the SAP tables directly. Simple queries which requires going into apps, putting in fields. It became more conversational in nature, where what are my open POs for the last month? How much inventory do I have in so-and-so warehouse? So all of this information is lying in SAP tables in some form of data, structured, unstructured, but we were able to fetch it out and present it to the user in a more structured manner, or conversational manner. So those are some of the use cases definitely that we were able to implement. We are looking at manufacturing and distribution as next phase. We've been working or engaging heavily with Google for that. We looked at opportunities for smart factories, logistic intelligence, transport management systems, even visual inspections on the quality batch management. So this is the thing, what we did notice was trying to introduce AI in an extremely, I'm not going to say critical shop operation floor, which has, at the back end, has a patient life at risk. It is hugely frowned upon. We realize that there is a lot of human in the loop that is basically required at that point of time. We can have AI do a lot of things, but a mistake can cost the company a lot. So we're a little bit careful. We are more trying to take it a more careful approach in towards AI and implementing in those areas. And we'll be looking at Gemini and Google to partner with you guys. And I think going forward in the growth of AI in Termo, Google and Gemini will play an important role, not just as technology providers or platform service providers, but as strategic partners.
Yeah, and I think that's a good pivot because, Phil, you've been working a lot with us, partnering with us on AI and how it can be implemented in Deloitte. Do you want to talk a little bit about our co-innovations and our partnership on that?
Yeah, I think where we are as far as within our journey, and obviously, again, we're talking about co-innovation and the work that's going on between Deloitte and Google and our strategic partnership as we look to continue to move down that path. Following a similar type track with our partnership with SAP as well, working to look at how do we not only innovate and put AI and become more of an AI native type organization across our SDLC, looking for how we change the way that we deliver work products and the way that we support, and that we're able to enhance our capabilities both from a total cost of operations, driving efficiencies, and really exploring where those opportunities lie. With both SAP and with Google, as well as with our other service providers and enterprise solutions, as we're looking at tying that information together, both from a product perspective as well as from an overall support model and support perspective. We're implementing a very aggressive schedule over the course of the next 12 to 14 months, and really are expecting to continue to take what we've seen as far as the gains that we've achieved so far and really push those forward. And do that with partnership and do that with cooperation and collaboration to help us continue to advance our business. And similar to probably everyone in this room, our business continues to expand. They continue to evolve. They continue to look at how they want to transform. And we have to be able to move at the speed of business and be able to do that both from a product landscape and leveraging agentic AI capabilities, but also being able to look at how we can quickly solve problems, solve needs, make sure that we are able to scale up and down to be able to support those. And AI is foundational and fundamental to that success as we're driving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, listening to all of you, it's almost becoming an ISV for agentic, but it also has its own, if you say, its own characteristic that when you apply it to an SAP system, it's very different than a consumer, right? And I think that's the big thing that I think we're all stepping forward is how do we not break an SAP system, break business processes, but how do we bring it with the same diligence, the same rigor that we have underneath? I think thank you for sharing. I would like to thank you. I mean, I know could talk all day, and I'm sure there's questions from the audience, but we will not have time for questions, but if you want to hang around afterwards, if not, we can just go and see Weezer. But I want to thank you so much, Phil, Lars, and Jay, for sharing your stories, because I think this is the best value is to actually have what our customers are doing and sharing what your thoughts are and how your journey, as each one is unique.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.